It's great to welcome back to the program today Congressman Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th district, located in the heart of Silicon Valley. Where to start, right? I mean, I think maybe the first place would be second stimulus, given what's going on with coronavirus, discussions of a payroll tax, discussions of an extension or expansion, and to what degree of this enhanced unemployment? What are your priorities? What do you think needs to happen and when?
Well, first, we have to be clear-eyed about what the problem is. The problem is that there are not enough jobs. I mean, people don't have enough money to pay basic rent, to get groceries. So when people say, oh, these unemployment checks are some disincentive to work, they're 5 times the job seekers as there are jobs. And the irony is that by not giving this money, it's not just that we're doing enormous damage to middle class and working class families. I mean, some are having foreclosures, some aren't being able to get enough nutritious food for their kids. It's also that we're damaging the economy because the economy is stalling if people don't have money to spend. So the priority has to be to stick to the $600, to get that extended through the end of the year, to get funding for states and localities. Of course, as you know, David, I've been pushing for $2,000 a month for people. That wasn't in the House bill, so I don't want to mislead people. And it's unrealistic that's going to be in the cards for this. But we have to stick to the $600, the stimulus, and the fund money for state and local governments.
I was initially, at least sort of loosely, open to the idea of the payroll tax cut that has been floated by Donald Trump. I then changed my mind because I realized that it seems like a way to weaken Social Security and Medicare, and to then maybe use that deliberate weakening as a reason to justify further weakening or defunding. So I ended up deciding I didn't like it. And in particular, because the way I read it, it's only a holiday. It is not actually a cut. In other words, you would then, on your taxes when you file, potentially owe it back. And so I ended up saying I don't like it. Where are you on it?
Yeah, I don't think it makes sense, and particularly because we have the challenge now of businesses not opening. I mean, if you work for a restaurant or indoor dining, it doesn't matter if you have a payroll tax cut. That's not going to get you back to work until the virus is under control. And I don't see it getting under control until the next year, until we have a vaccine and better therapeutics. So you could argue in a traditional recession, a payroll tax cut may provide some added incentive to hiring. It favors businesses over workers, but you may say, okay, we need it as one tool. But in a pandemic where the ability to create new jobs is restricted by public health, I don't think it makes sense.
So I'm curious whether you have any other, as a member of the House, insight into what we might call the real case numbers. And what I mean by that is a couple of examples are, we saw this leveling off after July 16th, which was exactly when data started going to HHS instead of the CDC. It's a
Right.
question mark, although I'm not alleging deliberate foul play yet. But then on top of that, Florida's numbers have gone down, but they stopped testing on Thursday because of the hurricane and only restarted yesterday. So that would be a very clear reason why we don't have a complete picture there. The California COVID-19 dashboard yesterday put up a message saying that for several days cases had been underreported, although the reason why is not yet clear to me. Are you working with the same data the public is working with? Do you have any other insights into more accurate data?
We're working with the same data. We don't get any briefing of better data. And I think whether it's deliberate, I don't know, but it's certainly not transparent. I mean, there's been a lot of obfuscation. There isn't a clear way of collecting this data. And the reality is it's the hospitalizations and the deaths that continue to be outrageous. I mean, especially when you look at other countries. So the cases, of course, matter, but the no one can dispute the data that we still don't have this under control, given the amount of deaths that we're unfortunately facing and given the amount of hospitalization we're facing.
The topic of cases versus tests. If you don't test, you don't find cases. Case fatality rate versus deaths per capita. This all kind of exploded on Monday night in this interview that the president gave to Axios's Jonathan Swan. I'm guessing you saw the interview.
I did. I mean, and you know, it's very hard to look. The president has one skill. He's very good at marketing and branding, but you can't spin death. You can't market when hospitals are filled. And so he was trying to say when the relevant statistic is the percentage of people with cases who are dying. And it is true that that percentage has gone down as treatments have improved. But that is not the relevant statistic. The relevant statistic is not what percentage of people who are getting COVID are dying. The relevant statistic is why are so many Americans getting COVID compared to other countries. And I think the president was unable to spin his way out of that. He obviously understands the distinction. He's just hoping that he can fool people, but you can't fool people when it's their own public health.
That's interesting. So you think he does understand these issues in more detail than maybe he lets on, and he's spinning? Because I actually question whether he understands some of this stuff. Your sense is that it's deliberate and that it's optics.
I think in that case, I mean, I don't think he's deeply reflective, but I think he looks for the numbers that make the most sense, and he tries to put them out. If the death rates were lower, he would have to put that number out. So I think his modus operandi, his whole life has been take any news, exaggerate it a bit, make it sound great and to your advantage. And in many cases, that has worked with him with people who are busy in their lives and don't have the time to look through long articles. The challenge here is suddenly people are taking the time to pay attention because it's their own health, it's their parents' health, it's their neighbors' health. And so they have far more details. And when you have a situation of an engaged citizenry on an issue, Trump's strategy really falls flat. And that's why I think you've seen him struggling.
What do you think, or I guess let me rephrase it in a different way. I imagine that if you were scheduled to do an interview that your staff felt very strongly would potentially be a disaster, that logic would reach you and you might listen to advice that says this maybe isn't a good interview to do. The context is, how do you think these insane interviews are even happening with the president? Is it that he doesn't listen to his staff and that he believes he'll always come out on top? I mean, I'm trying to understand how these things are happening so frequently.
Yeah, I think from his perspective, he's succeeded, quote unquote, succeeded in a material sense at a lot of things he's done in life. He's managed to talk himself out of bankruptcies. He came out of nowhere and became president of the United States. And I think he has a lot of self-confidence and hubris that his view is the more exposure, the better, and that he can talk his way out of anything. And this is a common problem when people become president. Obviously, it's massively exaggerated in Trump's case, where he does not have the humility to see his own weaknesses. And I think that's creating a large amount of the problems for him.
So what does that get you thinking about in terms of potential Biden versus Trump debates? I've said from a practical standpoint, I can't think of an election I voted in where I care less about seeing debates. I mean, I just think I have more than enough information, uniquely so in this case, to make a decision, and that's to vote for Joe Biden. There's speculation about Joe Biden, the debates are better for Biden, or the debates are better for Trump, and a lot of that depends on, what your belief is about the cognitive state of either or both of them. What's your sense about the debates, not generally, but in this particular case?
Well, I think that Biden will debate and should debate, because I think the story of him not debating would be a much bigger deal and lead to speculation that is unfair and wrong. And I think people underestimate Biden. I mean, if you look, as you know, I co-chaired the Bernie Sanders campaign. We were very excited when we had a one-on-one opportunity with Biden. And I think everyone would tell you that Biden held his own. I mean, it was not a knockout punch for Bernie Sanders. If anything, I think it was probably a draw. So my sense is Biden's debate skills improved a lot through the course of the primary. And I think one of the mistakes Donald Trump is making is by putting all his chips in these debates and setting the bar so low. If Biden has a satisfactory performance, he's going to really, I think, get the upper hand. And I think Biden's perfectly capable of having a solid performance.
That's super interesting, because I remember that in the sort of Twitter Bernie space before the one-on-one debates, There were very high hopes that Joe Biden was going to implode, and that was going to be the moment at which Bernie took over. And as you mentioned, it really was a draw in a sense. I do think that the heavy focus on coronavirus probably helped Joe Biden to some degree, and there was less focus in that debate on other issues. But so even within the Bernie camp, there were high hopes about that one-on-one debate.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was sort of our final hope to try to shake up the race. Obviously, we were doing very well headed into Super Tuesday. We had a disappointing Super Tuesday. It was not anticipated that everyone would withdraw and endorse Biden. I mean, it's a free country. People can do that. But really, no one thought the establishment would coalesce around Biden that quickly. And so we needed a game changer. And we thought this debate was a place we could have one. I mean, Bernie, objectively, I think, had done much better in a lot of the debates leading up to that debate than Biden had.
Yes.
But Biden has exceeded expectations in that debate. And so he's certainly capable of doing that. And I think Trump is making a mistake if he's putting all his eggs in that basket.
So let's talk a little bit about the last 3 months here to the election, where every member of the House is up for re-election. 33 plus 2 Senate seats are available. And of course, it's the presidential election. There are some in my audience that are feeling very confident about the presidential piece, seeing polls that have Joe Biden doing very well. Today, I went through and pointed out, for example, in a recent poll where Joe Biden is winning by 9, when you look at the margin of error, that could be actually only a 2.4% lead for Joe Biden. And Hillary won by 2.2 in 2016 at the popular vote level, but lost the Electoral College. When I look at state by state polling, which looks quite good for Joe Biden, the state polling was not great in 2016. National was good. In other words, Hillary was up 3 and won by 2.2. That's great. Wisconsin said Hillary was going to win and she lost. So I am very cautious about any complacency at all going into this election, while some are extraordinarily confident. What do you think is the right perspective on the data?
I think caution is better. I would say if the election were tomorrow, Biden would win, because I think the polling is so overwhelming in one direction. But the election is not tomorrow, and there's a lot that can happen in the next 90 days. The debates being one of them. That doesn't mean don't debate, because that would be an issue in and of itself. But the point is that the conventions haven't happened, the debates haven't happened. We don't know what the economy is going to look like come end of September and October. We don't know whether coronavirus is going to be on the retreat in some sense and getting slightly better, or whether it's getting worse. We don't know the impact of who he picks as a vice president. This is not a situation of George W. Bush in 2008, where George W. Bush had collapsed into the 30s, and really the American people had totally written him off. And I don't think it's even at the level of Jimmy Carter, I really admire Jimmy Carter. I think he was an exceptional person. But Trump has been stubbornly at 40, 41, 42. That means if he gets a 5-point swing and gets his approval up to 45, this is a very competitive race. And then you put you put on top of that this fact that the voter suppression, the difficulty of mail-in ballots, the energetic nature of his base. And I think we have to assume that this is going to be a drag-out fight.
When it comes to the Senate, it looks to me as though if Democrats keep the House, which you are projected to, if Joe Biden were to win, that a lot of what gets done in the next 2 years depends on whether Democrats can take control of the Senate. And I've looked at the races up and down, and certainly there's a path now that is a clearer path than it was 6 and 12 and 18 months ago. What races are you looking at in the Senate, and what's your sense of where that might go?
Well, I think Arizona, we've got a great shot with Mark Kelly. I think in North Carolina with Cunningham, we have a very, very strong shot. I think Susan Collins is in deep trouble. I think Steve Bullock in Montana has made that race much more competitive. Our candidates are doing very well, but I think it largely depends on Biden. I mean, if Biden has the kind of win that his polling currently shows, I think we have a very good chance of carrying the Senate. If this race tightens, as I fear it may, then our chances of getting the sweep we need in Senate seats becomes harder. And it became harder where some of the candidates won, the right candidates from the Republican side in the Kansas primary, and they've been fortunate not to elect some of the most crazy people where we could have had a pickup opportunity.
Last thing I want to touch on, there's been this idea now of, could an election be delayed? What would it look like? What would be the reasons? Are there ways for the president to stay in the Oval Office? And I've tried not to give this more attention than it deserves, because when it comes right down to it, we've not had a federal election delay in the history of this country. On January 20th, Trump stops being president if he's not reelected. And then, a series of other things happen. Is this at all being taken seriously among you and your colleagues? Is there a discussion of this, or is it basically just not being paid attention to?
My concern is not that he's going to delay the election. My concern is that there is a early reporting of election day results which tend to favor Republicans traditionally, and he may have an early lead in one of these battleground states. And then there's delay and not proper counting of absentee ballots. And if you have a few percent election in a place like Florida, in a place like Wisconsin, that there's tremendous pressure put on the state legislatures to certify those states in favor of Trump. So I don't see a situation where the states certify Joe Biden, the House and Senate certify Joe Biden, and Donald Trump stays in the White House. I think a far more risky situation is like 1876, where you actually have state legislatures conspiring with the White House to give the result to Trump on a close call. And that to me is the disenfranchisement and states calling it for Trump are what I think are the deep concerns.
Yeah, I'm not conspiratorial by nature, but after months of railing against vote by mail, when Donald Trump tweeted 2 days ago or 3 days ago, everybody in Florida should vote by mail, my mind immediately goes to, what does he know about Ron DeSantis's plans that now all of a sudden make him very into the idea of Florida voting by mail? And I think it goes along the lines you're talking about, which is the role that the state and secretaries of states may have.
Yeah, and I mean, look, he's doesn't even try to give principle any due. I mean, he's basically saying, okay, in the states that I need absentee voting, please vote absentee. In the states where absentee voting may hurt me, don't do it. It's just raw power. But this is, they understand that if it were an election which was clean, where everyone who should be voting and wanting to vote votes, Trump can't overcome those numbers. So the disenfranchisement, the trying to create confusion, and then the biggest risk, I think, is this idea that Donald Trump, imagine if on election day he's up by a couple points in Wisconsin or Florida, even if a week later we know he's going to lose by 4 or 5 points, you could see him declaring victory. And it becomes much harder than for the states, where those state legislators are in Trump-heavy districts, to do the right thing. And so that I think is the bigger fear of how they would cheat or take the election.
I completely agree, and it's exactly the point that I've been making. Congressman Ro Khanna, representing California's 17th District. Always a pleasure, and I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, David. I appreciate all of your commentary and look forward to being back on.